And there's been many great TV shows we've seen over the years that ended up abruptly cancelled despite being very promising. And Avengers, Earth's Mightiest Heroes is one of the most impactful series that still gets discussed to this day despite a surprising cancellation more than a decade ago. To see the show get cancelled was honestly tragic. I remember it vividly because I watched the show when it originally aired, and I recall reading rumors on forums and message boards about the series being potentially cancelled while its second season was still premiering episodes. And when season 2 ended and Marvel officially announced that Earth's Mightiest Heroes wouldn't be renewed, it was kinda devastating really. And if you're a fan of the show, you know I'm not really exaggerating. This show was so good that it stands as some people's favorite version of the Marvel universe outside the comics, myself included. It was an incredibly well-written show with fantastic, well-developed three-dimensional characters that were properly adapted with accurate characterizations. Its storytelling was really engaging and carefully planned out, evident by its great use of foreshadowing and all the seeds for future story arcs they planted throughout the series, which later paid off. Though, unfortunately, there were also many other planned storylines which never got to materialize due to the show's abrupt cancellation. And it's only natural to wonder, what would have happened if Earth's Mightiest Heroes had continued? And why was the show cancelled? And this is exactly what we're gonna focus on today. Given that ever since the show was cancelled, many of its writers and producers have gone on the internet to talk about many rejected ideas from the series' potential Season 3, Season 4, and even a possible Season 5. So we're gonna take a look at the show's production history and many of its cancelled episodes that never saw the light of day, which included possible adaptations of storylines like Civil War, Ragnarok, Siege, and many more. Now, it shouldn't really surprise us that the show's creators were interested in adapting so many different stories from Marvel's history. Earth's Mightiest Heroes, ever since Season 1 and well before its conception, had always taken many comic book influences. Throughout its run, we saw them tackle many classic stories like the Kree-Skrull War or the formation of the Masters of Evil, while also covering more modern Marvel stories such as Secret Invasion. And this is a stylistic preference that greatly benefited the series, and some of its staff have even spoken about it before. In a 2012 interview that comicbookmovie.com had with Christopher Yost, who's a fantastic writer that's had a long history with Marvel, having worked on shows like X-Men Evolution, Iron Man Armored Adventures, Wolverine and the X-Men, and also some great comic books such as his Scarlet Spider run from 2011. He also served as the head writer and story editor of Earth's Mightiest Heroes. And during the interview, he mentioned how one of the best things about working on the series was how they were able to cherry-pick the best and most iconic storylines from the Avengers' entire publication history, from their classic story arcs to their more modern ones, being able to combine all the best elements and ideas from their decades worth of material and condensing it into a unique portrayal of the Marvel Universe that felt like an idealized version of who these characters should be. This is similar to what the Justice League and DCAU line of animated shows did with the DC Universe. Much like with EMH, the creative staff behind those shows also got to pick and choose the best storylines and ideas from multiple different eras of DC in order to make an amalgamation of everything that made those characters so great. And the Justice League cartoon was actually influential for the conception of EMH, since in another interview Christopher Yost was asked about what other animated series served as an influence for the show, and he directly responded that Justice League had set the bar for superhero animated adaptations, which is really true, and I think that the creative team behind EMH learned all the right lessons from the DCAU, with how they were able to combine so many great elements from Marvel Comics and used them as the basis for an adaptation that truly feels like they captured the essence of these characters and the spirit behind their original stories. Being faithful to the classic source material was also really important for the show's conception. Its visual style and overall feel harkens back to the classic Silver Age era of Marvel. In an archived 2014 interview with Florida Geek Scene, they spoke to Thomas Perkins, who was the series' supervising character designer, and he said that while he was working on developing the show's aesthetic, it was the desire of producer Ciro Nieli to have the series be mainly inspired by the old-school Stan Lee and Jack Kirby era of Avengers comics, given that he and most of the show's staff were huge fans of that classic period. This influence was truly apparent once we saw the final show. Its blocky and somewhat angular art style with bold colors were very reminiscent of Kirby's style. We can also see his influence in the use of Kirby dots, or the Kirby crackle, which were basically effects that Kirby drew in his art to highlight stuff like negative space, energy blasts, smoke, cosmic radiation, and other types of particles. In EMH, we can see them being used throughout the series, like when Odin or Loki used the Odin Force, and it was even referenced in a small Easter egg.
Kirby kibble dog food, now with the Kirby dots of real beef that dogs love.
The show's adherence to the old school Marvel period is also why they did stuff like having the specific original 5 members be the Avengers founders, which were Iron Man, Ant-Man, the Wasp, Thor, and Hulk, with Captain America only joining the team later on, just like in the comics. Supervising producer Joshua Fine also mentioned in an old interview with Medinist.com how they made Loki the one responsible for the supervillain prison breakout to have him be also responsible for the formation of the Avengers, similar to the comics, except they also used him for a larger overarching storyline, where he served as the main villain of Season 1. An interesting fact about the early development of Avengers EMH is that it actually took some elements from 2 other cancelled Marvel animated shows that were never produced. As Joshua Fine detailed in that same interview, he was one of the developers of a proposed show titled Hulk Gamma Corps during the late 2000s, which was going to be a show focusing on Hulk leading a team of other gamma-powered heroes, but once it was confirmed that the series wouldn't get greenlit for production and that instead an Avengers show was being greenlit, he felt like it would be a shame to see all the great work they did on Gamma Corps to go to waste, so they decided to fold in some ideas from that Hulk pitch into this new Avengers project. Some character designs done by Ciro Nieli were reworked for EMH, with Joshua Fine even saying that both Hawkeye and Black Panther were planned to appear on Gamma Corps, and that their designs had similarities with their final looks from EMH. Fine also revealed that the ideas of having a prison for gamma-powered villains and the leader planning an escape were all elements that originated from Hulk Gamma Corps. There was also a Thor animated series being developed around the same time, which came about after the production of the animated movie Thor: Tales of Asgard. Joshua Fine alongside producer Greg Johnson had a lot of ideas to fully flesh out Thor's mythology and the 9 realms, and they even designed a map detailing the realms in the Marvel Universe. There's not much else we know about this potential Thor series besides these few concept art made by artist John Boy Mayers, but that map Joshua Fine described was later reworked into EMH during a brief scene where it was overlaid on top of Thor's face. If we're talking about the early development of EMH, then we also need to talk about 2 other Marvel shows from around that time, those being Wolverine and the X-Men and Spectacular Spider-Man. And that's because not only were they some of the best Marvel and comic book shows we've ever seen, at least in my opinion, but also because all 3 shows were originally meant to share the same continuity, and in the eyes of many fans, these shows all take place in the same shared universe. This has been confirmed on multiple occasions in different interviews and comments from the show's crew. In that Joshua Fine interview we've been discussing, he also went on to talk about how he became the supervising producer for Wolverine and the X-Men when that show's 2nd season got greenlit, which was going to adapt Age of Apocalypse. While Fine was working on developing Wolverine and the X-Men Season 2, he was also simultaneously working on a new Avengers animated series which had just been greenlit. And since him and other members of the staff that were working on EMH, like Christopher Yost, are such huge Marvel fans, they immediately thought about making connections between the 2 series and slowly create a new Marvel animated universe. This included ideas for potential crossover episodes for Wolverine and the X-Men's planned Season 2, like an episode where Beast would visit Ant-Man, and another episode where Wolverine would be part of a Black Ops special mission alongside 2 S.H.I.E.L.D. agents, those being Hawkeye and Black Widow. And these were all meant to be the same characters from Earth's Mightiest Heroes, and the episodes were meant to take place before Season 1 of that show, since Hawkeye and Black Widow were still S.H.I.E.L.D. agents. Ultimately, this didn't end up happening because Wolverine and the X-Men's production went through serious financial issues, and one of the companies that mainly developed the series couldn't finance it anymore. So it sadly ended up being cancelled in the middle of the development of Earth's Mightiest Heroes' 1st season. Still though, they still included some connections between the 2 series, like a brief Wendigo cameo escaping one of the prisons for supervillains, Wolverine having a cameo fighting with Captain America during World War II, Nick Fury having a similar look between the 2 shows, and there was also a mention to the Mutant Response Division, which was a group of villains from Wolverine and the X-Men.
The power dampeners are having a hard time with him, and now we know why. He's a mutant.
Double the power on his collar, then contact the Mutant Response Division. Let the Mighties handle mutants.
EMH is also connected to Spectacular Spider-Man, but we'll talk more about that later on in the video once we get to Season 2. All three shows combined form a shared universe that's commonly called the Yostverse by some fans, and given that all of the shows had heavy involvement from Christopher Yost. And the universe also includes the direct-to-DVD movies Hulk vs. and Thor Tales of Asgard, which were also worked on by Christopher Yost. And they are some good movies, especially Hulk vs. and especially that Hulk vs. Wolverine part. That was so badass, and Steve Blum voices Wolverine in both that movie and also EMH, another way in which this is all connected. Joshua Fine's interview also mentions that episode 15 almost showed how Ant-Man and the Wasp first met, but it had to be cut due to the episode already being too crowded with new characters and storylines. What's also interesting is that Colleen O'Shaughnessy, the Wasp's voice actress, has stated on Twitter that she was initially considered for the role of Pepper Potts. Another undeniable influence that a lot of people picked up on ever since season 1 was the show's inspiration from the MCU. The series mainly takes cues from the classic Silver Age era of Marvel, combined with modern storylines and sensibilities. But the show came about in a weird time when Marvel was being acquired by Disney. EMH was greenlit and originally announced on October 2008. It started production before Disney had fully completed Marvel's acquisition, so while it doesn't stick too close to the movies, it did pretty much have to include some resemblance to their film counterparts, due to the infamous brand synergy. We can tell by the inclusion of stuff like Tony Stark's attitude and visual look, resembling Robert Downey Jr., also his shots inside the helmets which were just like the movie, and also Jarvis being an AI rather than a human butler. EMH didn't go overboard with this though, and it does feel like an entirely separate entity from the MCU. But as the movies kept releasing and became more successful, and Disney did start to want to see more connectivity across the Marvel brand. This is something that ultimately affected the development of Season 2, not only in the sense that it kept including more synergy between it and the MCU, like the plot of the episode Powerless having the three main Avengers who had movies coming out at the time, and their looks resembling how they appeared in those movies, but the brand synergy and executive changes within the company after its merger with Disney ended up greatly affecting the development of the show itself. While its second season was in the middle of its production, Marvel brought in Man of Action as the series' new showrunners. Man of Action are a writing team responsible for many action cartoons such as Ben 10 and Generator Rex, and they were brought in to rewrite and condense many episodes and storylines which were already planned out, and then made significant connections and groundwork for other larger story arcs that the show was developing. They turned that second half of the season into more simple, episodic and self-contained stories, greatly changing some of the second season's original ideas. And when you actually rewatch the show, you do get a sense that the second half of season 2 felt kind of rushed, and that it introduced new ideas without fully fleshing them out, and resolved storylines too quickly, storylines that could have been expanded on a lot more. It was a bit of a downgrade in the show's quality. And I remember that at the time, many fans started speculating that Marvel and Disney were planning to cancel EMH and replace it with a new show, which, sadly, ended up being more than just speculation. During a 2012 interview with Jeff Loeb, a comic book writer and Marvel executive who was the head of Marvel Animation at the time, gave very vague comments when asked about the future of EMH beyond its second season. And later in 2012, Marvel officially announced that they would cancel Earth's Mightiest Heroes and replace it with a new series that was heavily influenced by the MCU and Joss Whedon's Avengers films. A new show titled Avengers Assemble, which was going to be developed by Man of Action, the new showrunners of EMH that came in during its second season. It's also been rumored that initially, Avengers Assemble was going to be a continuation of EMH that had a visual redesign to make the series fall closer in line with the MCU, so it seems that at one point, Disney and Marvel did consider the possibility of reworking EMH into a new sequel show that more closely resembled the MCU while keeping the same continuity from the series. But in the end, they decided against the idea, and it later morphed into an entirely new Avengers iteration set in a separate shared universe with another new show, Ultimate Spider-Man. Speaking of Ultimate Spider-Man, A lot of you might remember that Drake Bell guest starred as Spider-Man on the episode Along Came a Spider, since he was also voicing the role on Ultimate Spider-Man, which had premiered while Season 2 of EMH was currently airing. An interesting fact about the episode, however, is that it was originally written with the intention of using the same Spidey as in Spectacular Spider-Man, confirming that both shows do share the same continuity, and Christopher Yost himself has even confirmed this on Twitter. Another thing is that Josh Keaton, Spidey's voice actor from Spectacular Spider-Man, had actually already fully recorded his lines as Spider-Man for the EMH episode before being finally replaced by Drake Bell.
And then when we didn't hear anything about it, we kind of knew, they're probably getting rid of the show. But Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, was going to be the kind of like my send-off. So I was like, all right, sweet. Well, at least I get to play Spider-Man in this last thing. That's cool. That's cool. Awesome. And then the night that it aired and I was going to watch it, I watched it and I was like, wow, that is not my voice. That is not my voice. He's hitting all the same beats I'm hitting. The animation was probably already done, so they had to have him kind of listen and repeat to what I did and say, okay, now you do it. And I was like, that's not my voice. And then when I looked at the credits, it said Drake Bell. It's like, wow, okay. And then that's right around then is when they announced they're coming out with Ultimate Spider-Man, and Drake Bell's going to play Ultimate Spider-Man. And I was like, man, it sucks. That sucks that they did that to me. Like, they could have at least called me so I wouldn't have gotten so excited and just said, hey, you know what, we were replacing.
This is only one example of how the reworking of EMH during the middle of the production of its second season ended up drastically changing the show. And many of its writers have gone on to provide details about some of the original ideas of many Season 2 episodes they had planned, before Jeff Loeb and Man of Action made changes to the series. The episode Powerless that we mentioned earlier was initially going to be focused on the Enchantress and Loki using magic to take away the powers of Thor, Captain America, and Miss Marvel rather than Iron Man like in the final episode. But Miss Marvel was probably taken out of the episode by Man of Action because she didn't have a movie out at the time, so they most likely chose Iron Man instead to have even more resemblance to the MCU. Powerless was also originally going to have a scene that revealed how the Enchantress was working with Surtur on her own will rather than being mind-controlled by him, like a previous episode had shown. And some storyboards from this scene have been leaked online. The Sentry was originally going to appear on the show, which would have been really cool since the character has still never made his animated debut yet. Christopher Yost revealed that they planned to include him in the episode Assault on 42, and that he was gonna get his own episode entirely dedicated to him. Later on, he would have returned in the episode New Avengers, with Yost sharing a page from an early script where they would have tried to recruit him into the New Avengers. Speaking of that episode, Yellow Jacket would have originally been a member of the New Avengers as well, and the episode was initially going to take place after the episode Operation Galactic Storm, which if you recall was about the Kree trying to create a wormhole connecting Earth with their galaxy, causing the sun to implode and killing all life on Earth. This plot was connected to the predictions that Kang the Conqueror made throughout the series, where he said that Captain America was the cause for an apocalyptic event which would destroy life on Earth and inevitably lead to Kang's own future.
Kang, you say you're from the future. Why would you want to take out Captain America?
To save the world.
The reason why Kang blamed Captain America for this is because he was kidnapped and imprisoned by the Skrull at the end of Season 1, which led to the Earth getting involved in the Kree-Skrull War, which eventually caused its destruction. So Kang was right given the events of his own timeline. Joshua Fine and Christopher Yost went on Twitter, or X as it's called now, to detail how their original plans for Season 2 included Kang's wife Ravonna being awakened from stasis as a result of the Avengers preventing the Kree from creating a wormhole and ultimately destroying Earth. By preventing that event, they changed the future and Ravonna was affected by this. They explain how after she was awakened she would have traveled to different time periods in search of a future version of Kang who was stuck in ancient Egypt. With Ravonna going on a rampage and the Avengers far away in another part of the galaxy, Earth was left unprotected, and this would have been why the New Avengers were formed, and why their episodes originally took place after Operation Galactic Storm. Joshua Fine explained how the network obligated them to separate the plot from the episode with the Kang and Ravonna plot to make it a more standalone story. given that one of the objectives of reworking the show's second season was to make EMH more episodic. This Ravonna plot was also later partly addressed in the tie-in comics. Emperor Stark was a really cool episode from the series that showed Vision mysteriously waking up after a month of being offline, only to find out that the Avengers and Tony Stark are now ruling the world, later discovering that it was actually Purple Man the one who mind-controlled the Avengers and used them to take over Earth. However, it's been confirmed that the episode actually originated as an adaptation of the Emperor Doom storyline from the comics, with Yost even sharing an excerpt from the original script detailing how Dr. Doom attacked the Purple Man in order to capture him and use his powers to conquer the planet. And while I personally still liked how the Emperor Stark episode turned out, I would have loved to see the original Emperor Doom adaptation that they had planned. There was also apparently going to be an episode focused on Nova during Season 2, which was going to be titled The Man Called Nova, like his first comic appearance. Other cosmic characters that would have appeared included the Brood and also the Elders of the Universe. The story arcs focusing on Ultron creating Vision and Red Skull posing as a member of the US government from the second season weren't meant to be a part of Season 2. They actually initiated as ideas that the staff had for possible Seasons 3 and 4, and they would have been larger, more expansive storylines rather than the more standalone stories that we saw in the end. Other scrapped ideas from Season 2 included turning Falcon and Mockingbird into full-on Avengers, resurrecting Wonder Man, and more importantly, the Season 2 finale was originally going to be different. The final episode of the show we ended up seeing had most heroes from the entire show returning to defend Earth against Galactus, but it felt really rushed considering the potential of a story like that, with Galactus debuting and being defeated all in the same episode. However, this improvised finale they came up with was born out of the abrupt reworking and later cancellation of EMH, serving as a homage for the entire series, but it was originally intended for the finale to be a three-parter that had the Avengers traveling to Hala, the capital of the Kree homeworld, to try to stop firsthand the Kree-Skrull War, and they would have ultimately had to defend Hala against the hungry Galactus that would have tried to destroy it. Also, they considered including Silver Surfer as one of the heralds of Galactus, but Yost said that rights issues with the character prevented them from using him. So as we can see, the show's writers had many ideas that went unused due to the unforeseen changes that the show underwent, with it ultimately being cancelled in favor for a new series that more closely resembled the MCU. But the series writers had always envisioned the show as a long-lasting series that could potentially adapt most of the Avengers' greatest storylines from multiple decades of the team's history, condensing their most iconic moments in an amalgamation of the comics' greatest elements, similar to what the DCAU and the Justice League series did with decades of DC Comics history. So as you can imagine, they had many ideas for a potential Season 3, Season 4, and even a possible Season 5. A fun look into concepts that could have been explored had EMH continued were shared by character designer Thomas Perkins, who, after its cancellation, posted some potential what-if ideas that he personally would have liked to see in the series. Just to clarify, these were not actual cancelled episodes that were planned by the entire creative staff. These are just concepts that Thomas Perkins himself thought of and illustrated just for fun, but they are some legitimately interesting ideas. He thought of many concepts, like an episode seemingly inspired by Planet Hulk, with him dressed as a gladiator, Mockingbird teaming up with a human fly, the Impossible Man seemingly granting the Fantastic Four's powers to the Hulk, Wasp, Captain America, and Ant-Man, appearances by Cyclops and Jean Grey, Deathlock appearing as an agent of Hydra fighting against Captain America, Damian Hellstrom apparently transforming Hawkeye into a werewolf, Rom the Space Knight teaming up with Hawkeye, Wasp gaining the power of Captain Universe, Ant-Man teaming up with Monica Rambeau and Machine Man, and also appearances from 3D Man, Morbius, and Omega the Unknown. All of these ideas were really interesting, and given that Thomas Perkins worked as a character designer on the show, these concepts still give us a pretty good idea as to how these new characters could have looked like if they had gotten the chance to be adapted on the show. So it's really cool to see these concepts even if they weren't actual cancelled episodes from the series. Luckily though, there is more information we know about actual planned episodes from the show's potential future. The show's writers have previously described Season 1 as the Assemble season, Season 2 as being the Cosmic season, and, apparently, the first half of Season 3 would have been the Magic season, with its second half focusing on the confrontation between the Avengers and the X-Men. For the show's 10th anniversary, Christopher Yost had actually shared on a Twitter thread an entire overview of all the planned storylines for Season 3, with synopses describing all 26 episodes. And we're gonna go through each synopsis because they are really interesting episode ideas. I'm also gonna leave a link on the description that has all episode synopsis in case you wanna read them for yourself. And there's also timestamps if you wanna move to another part of the video. Season 3's first episode would have been titled Strange Tales, and it would have been focused on the Avengers teaming up with Doctor Strange, after some of them have to face their worst fears because of the actions of Nightmare, and Yost even shared a couple of pages from the episode's opening, which would have shown how Tony Stark fell under Nightmare's powers. Episode 2 was called The Gentleman's Name is Magneto, and it would have focused on Magneto and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants fighting against the Avengers, also showing the debuts of Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, who would have had to choose which side they would fight for. Recurring Nightmare would have been the title for Episode 3, showing how Iron Man and Doctor Doom would be transported in time to ancient Camelot, and how they would have had to team up to defeat Modred the Mystic. Meanwhile, the Wasp would have attempted to bring them back to the present with the help of Black Knight. Episode 4 would have been titled Twilight, and it would have shown Wonder Man seeking out the Avengers as he's being chased by an army of fire demons in order to ask them to save Amor the Enchantress, all while Thor and Balder the Brave travel to Muspelheim, the realm of Surtur. Episodes 5 and 6 were gonna be a two-parter that would have had Doctor Strange and the Scarlet Witch teaming up after an ancient sorcerer named Kulan Goth transformed the Avengers and all of New York City into medieval versions of themselves. Episode 7 was titled Thor Croaks, and as you can imagine by the title, it would have adapted the story where Thor gets transformed into a frog, which is awesome. Episode 8 would have had Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. fighting against the resurgence of Hydra, and the Avengers fighting against the Serpent Society. Episode 9 would have seen the formation of the West Coast Avengers, seemingly composed of Hawkeye, Wonder Man, Mockingbird, and Tigra, fighting against the newly returned Graviton. Episodes 10 and 11 would have focused on the true origins of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, with the debuts of the High Evolutionary and the ancient demon Chthon. Episodes 12 and 13 would have been an adaptation of Ragnarok, finally paying off a number of references and groundwork that had been done all throughout the show's first 2 seasons. It would have been awesome to finally see Surtur attacking Earth, and see the repercussions of Loki's and the Enchantress' actions in causing Ragnarok. It also would have continued the subplot of Captain America owing Hela for bringing him back to life, with Yost suggesting that Cap would have died during these Season 3 episodes. Episode 14 would have seen the Avengers come into confrontation with the X-Men, given that they'd be looking for Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver after they had deserted from the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and the Avengers would have tried to protect them. Christopher Yost also confirmed on Twitter that his X-Men lineup would have included Professor X, Cyclops, Jean Grey, Wolverine, Nightcrawler, Storm, Kitty Pryde, Colossus, and Rogue, also using other X-Men characters and minor appearances if needed. Episode 15 would have seen the Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver officially joining the Avengers, and also the return of the Masters of Evil. The Nova episode would have finally been adapted during Season 3, showing the Brood having wiped out almost the entire Nova Corps, with Captain Marvel, Richard Rider, and the Avengers teaming up to stop them. In the next episode, we would have seen the Eternals attacking Wakanda to prepare for the arrival of the Celestials. Episode 18 would have seen Thor and Hulk teaming up to fight against Juggernaut, with the X-Men also getting involved later on, and that sounds awesome. The Last Avenger would have been the title of episode 19, and it would have shown a time-displaced Captain America moving through different time periods, from a team-up with Namor the Submariner during World War II, all the way to a dark, distant future controlled by Ultron. Episode 20 would have shown the Phoenix Force arriving on Earth and causing destruction. Episodes 21 and 22 would have seen the High Evolutionary trying to unleash a gene bomb to exterminate all races on Earth: humans, superhumans, mutants, Atlanteans, Inhumans, Eternals, and Deviants would have all been targeted by the High Evolutionary. Next, they wanted to do a sort of homage episode to the Defenders, with Doctor Strange, Namor, and Hulk teaming up to fight against the Elders of the Universe. The final 3 episodes from the season would have taken influence from the Phoenix Saga, with Jean Grey being possessed by the Phoenix Force and later altering reality itself, ultimately leading to a possible House of M adaptation. Yost has tweeted in the past that at the end of this season, Wanda and Jean would work together to trap the Phoenix Force in a pocket dimension akin to Heroes Reborn, with the X-Men ultimately sacrificing themselves. This also might have meant to tie in with the possible future plans for Wolverine and the X-Men, since it's also been reported that after its planned Age of Apocalypse story arc in Season 2, for Season 3 they were considering adapting the House of M storyline from the comics. But it's also been said that had EMH continued, they might have preferred to separate itself from the Wolverine and the X-Men continuity, so that they could introduce an entirely new version of the X-Men that didn't have so much previous continuity attached to them. Besides all of these ideas, Joshua Fine also mentioned in an interview that he considered adapting Taskmaster and the Mad Thinker into the show had they gotten a Season 3. And Christopher Yost also wanted to adapt the Squadron Supreme and the Black Order. He's also mentioned that Spider-Man would have returned for more guest appearances. Joshua Fine also said in an old forum post that he was personally waiting for Daredevil's rights to return to Marvel so they could include him on EMH. Blade could have also appeared for a guest appearance. And another thing is that the Asgardians would have established a new Asgard on the United States as a result of the events of Ragnarok. All these Season 3 plans sounded great, but we also have some details on what we possibly could have gotten to see during a 4th season of the show, with both halves of the season focusing on different major overarching storylines. The first half of Season 4 would have been titled Under Siege, and it would have combined elements of the comic book stories Acts of Vengeance and also Siege, which in the comics was a story about Norman Osborn leading a full-on attack on New Asgard after gaining a powerful position in the US government. But on Season 4 of EMH, it would have been Hydra attacking New Asgard instead of Norman Osborn, according to Yost. Also, throughout Seasons 1 and 2 we got hints towards the superheroes eventually coming at odds with the US government if they had ever gotten obligated to register with them, accepting their orders and giving up their secret identities, with Maria Hill especially being very insistent on having a superhero registry, and these plot points were laying the groundwork for a possible Civil War adaptation that would have taken place during the first half of Season 4, which is something that Joshua Fine confirmed on Twitter. And he also revealed that the Del Rusk, or Red Skull story from Season 2, was also originally meant to serve as build-up for a Civil War adaptation. The second half of Season 4 would have been titled Infinity Quest, and it would have shown the Elders of the Universe searching the Infinity Stones in order to destroy the universe and restarting it with themselves as the new gods and top beings of its new cosmic order. And the Avengers would have been scattered across different parts of the Marvel Universe. Finally, we don't have many details about a possible Season 5, but the show's writers have talked about possibly adapting Secret Wars, with Yost confirming yet again on Twitter that the Beyonder and Molecule Man would have been used for such a storyline, with them introducing those members in the back half of Season 4. One last thing I wanted to mention is that, besides the details we know about the potential plans they had for future seasons, Joshua Fine also revealed on a post on the Toons On forums a few years back, and that during his time working on EMH he had a list of series and movies about different Marvel characters he would have loved to do as full-on projects, and he actually did get the chance to individually pitch many of these ideas. For example, he really wanted to do a Heroes for Hire series with Luke Cage and Iron Fist. He also wanted to do a sort of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. show with Nick Fury, Hawkeye, and Black Widow, having a more spy thriller tone. A Captain America and Bucky series set in World War II was also something he considered, and there were 2 show ideas that apparently got some early development done on them, and those being a show about Iron Man and another show following the early adventures of Thor. And Joshua Fine said that, had EMH been able to continue normally, then it's very likely that if some of these shows were greenlit, then they also would have taken place in the same shared universe, and they would have served as potential spin-offs of EMH. And man, all of these ideas sound great. I've personally always wanted to see a World War II Captain America show, and that would be just so cool. So yeah, I know it was a long one, but these are all the rejected or unused ideas from Earth's Mightiest Heroes that I could find. and I honestly pretty much love most of these ideas. It makes me yearn even more for EMH to get a revival. This show is honestly my favorite depiction and adaptation of the Marvel Universe outside the main comics. And it, alongside Spectacular Spider-Man, are my favorite Marvel shows ever, and some of my favorite animated series in general. They are a clear example of what happens when people who are sincerely massive fans of a property get the chance to work on an adaptation and are truly able to capture the spirit of what made that property good in the first place. All because they have a deep understanding and appreciation of the source material that allows them to reinterpret it in a transformative and meaningful way. Every single writer, artist, and creative that got the chance to work on EMH forever left a mark on Marvel's history by making this show. And if you happen to have children or younger siblings, I highly suggest you watch this series with them, because it's probably the greatest entry point to the Marvel Universe. It's the type of show that's able to create lifelong fans, and the fact that so many people are asking for the show to be revived even to this day is proof of that. If X-Men 97 is able to revive a 30-year-old show, then I think there will always be some hope for Earth's Mightiest Heroes, especially if we keep the conversation going and continue talking about it. It was just a really great show with great characters, great stories, fantastic action scenes, an incredible art style, and the theme song. My god, the theme song was fucking amazing. And it all contributed in making Earth's Mightiest Heroes one of the greatest superhero shows ever made. With that being said, tell me, what do you think? Would you like to see EMH return for more seasons? What rejected idea that we went over the video did you like the most? I personally would have loved to see the episodes inspired by Avengers vs X-Men and Civil War get adapted. Also the introduction of new characters we couldn't get to see like Silver Surfer, Daredevil, Doctor Strange, and the return of Spider-Man. Especially if they could finally use Josh Keaton as Spectacular Spider-Man, which I'm also gonna be covering soon, by the way. I know some of you guys really want me to make a video on that show, just like you wanted me to make this one, and I really thank you guys for being patient with me, since I absolutely love both of these shows, and I always try to rewatch and make as much research as possible to make the best video I can possibly make for you guys, and also as a sign of respect for these shows. So rest assured that we will be revisiting the Yostverse. But let me know your thoughts on Earth's Mightiest Heroes in the comments below, and as always, thank you so much for watching.